more seats. You want to leave them open for a little bit?
Okay, we can call the to order the meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust. I'm calling to order first. I'm stuck reading. This is formally to advise that as required by Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on June 16, 2021, as extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Housing Committee will hold a public meeting at the time and place stated herein in this notice. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternate public access, which is provided on the town's website. So welcome, everyone. Is the Community Housing Committee going to call to order separately?
Yes. And you need to open by roll call vote because Myra is online.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Let's take a roll call vote. We'll start with Myra Sushenitz.
Here.
Bob Lawton. Here.
Is here. And who else we got?
You.
Now we're here.
Okay.
All right, we've got a quorum, just
Yeah, right.
barely, that's good.
Mary, can I get a copy of the minutes? I left them at home.
Yep, I'll get you that. Okay, John, you can open up the,
Okay. Recognizing a quorum, the chair opens the January 21st, 2025 meeting of the Community Housing Committee. This meeting is being held in a hybrid model, both in person in the hearing room of Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, and remotely via the virtual computer platform Zoom. Committee members may participate in person or through remote participation pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on June 16, 2021, and extended through March 31st, 2025. The information to access this meeting via Zoom is published on the agenda with the town clerk and on the town's website with a minimum 48-hour notice to the public. The public is welcome to attend in person or remotely. This meeting is being recorded. So with that, I open the meeting for the Community Housing Committee.
Recording in progress.
Roll call vote.
by roll call vote because Myra's
Okay.
on both committees.
Josh?
Present.
Drew?
Present.
Lee?
Present.
Joanne?
Present.
Greg?
Present.
And John present.
And Myra.
Myra?
Here.
Well done, Myra.
That'll take up a whole page of minutes. So, you both have meeting minutes in your packet. I know I sent them out a couple of hours ago, but if you're so willing to either approve them today or table them for the next time.
Randy, would you like to make
Yeah,
a
the
motion?
Affordable Housing Trust, Bob Lawton, I move the minutes as presented for the trust. Maybe Myra can second it.
Do I have a second, Myra?
Okay, second.
Any additions, corrections, deletions?
I'm good.
Nice work on the minutes, by the way, very detailed, much appreciated. Hearing no amendments, I would go for a roll call vote to approve the minutes of January 6, 2025 Affordable Housing Trust. Myra?
Aye.
Bob?
Yes.
Robert Rittenhour, aye. That's unanimous. Get the minutes out of the way.
And then, John, Lee has a comment on our minutes.
Just one really minor comment, but on page 4, The third paragraph down, it says recognizes Lee with 2 questions. Number 1 is okay, and then number 1 should be number 2 in the second question. That's a minor correction, but,
Okay, yep, thank you.
yep, that's it. And is, it's Scott, what's his name on the town?
Bill Scott.
Bill Scott. Are you there?
Here.
Are you a member of the MUC committee, or you're just representing the town?
I am the Assistant Town Administrator, serving as staff to the MUC Committee.
Okay.
I think you can call for a motion to approve the minutes of January 6th.
Can we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Lee?
I moved. Okay, and I second that, yeah.
Okay. Roll call vote. Josh?
Aye.
Drew?
Lee, aye.
Joanne?
Aye.
Greg? Myra?
She moved it, yeah. So
Okay.
go ahead.
And John?
Okay, then the next thing is, real quick, so it's the so you can open up the utilization, the MUC Housing.
Sure. Well, I just want to welcome everyone here. I want to thank Mary Wagon for all of her work in organizing these groups and all of the individuals. It's very helpful, and I think it's kind of a historic day for us. Folks representing all of the various housing agencies in our community have gathered, and I know we've got at least a couple of representatives that I saw from the Housing Authority as well, so I'm very happy there. And, we've got the sort of auspicious process of starting off our efforts to conduct a brainstorming session for housing ideas to assist the Mattakees Utilization Committee in making its recommendations. So I also welcome the members of the Mattakees Utilization Committee. Everyone's here with us this evening, and we started off last week. We had a very nice tour together with the community housing group of the facility. Thank the Recreation Department for walking us around the site. It was very eye-opening. And so with us today also, we have the Barrett Planning Group that is going to help facilitate. And I, brought my boxing gloves. I thought we might fight at this meeting. So if that happens, I just want you to know I'm ready for it. And but I think it's great to have some facilitators here. And I, in all seriousness, do hope to see a wide range of ideas, suggestions, and I don't think there's much room for fighting, but it's just great to see a turnout like this, and everyone has been looking forward to this for some time. So, we're anxious, I think, on the housing front to really lead the charge for looking at what's possible for our community on this huge site.
So there's 2 members of staff that weren't here last time. Can I impose on you to stand up and introduce yourselves?
Scott Smith, Deputy Fire Chief.
Aye.
And Steve?
Steve Reynolds, Acting Recreation Director.
And we should also recognize Kathy Williams as well, and thank her for all of her help getting this together.
And hi, are you representing a housing organization or a committee?
My name is Spiro Vitricostas. I am public, although I coincidentally happen to be the chairman of the Water Resources Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
And then online, we have Joe Glynn, who's an elected member of the Housing Authority. Jim Seymour from the Cape Cod and Islands Veterans Outreach Center.
Welcome, Jim.
And then
Joe?
I see Eileen and a phone number, but if you could put your names and your connection to the town in the chat, that'd be great.
Name, rank, and serial number.
Just for the minutes. And I'm really happy that Steve Reynolds is here, because we had 2, if we can go on to the site visit report, we had 2 site visits last week. One was January 16th, that was Thursday at 11 a.m., and that was me and Greg. And what I like to, we were freezing, but we did walk the site. We didn't go on to the Emmy Small School area, but we walked the site, so that was good. We looked at the amphitheater. We walked out to see Tar Pond in the back. Then the next day, the 17th at 1 o'clock, That was me, Lee, Hamilton, John Barr, and Bob Rittenhour. And who was closing up the building after our event but Steve Reynolds from the Recreation Department. He brought us inside where we get a little bit warm. We saw the gym and the auditorium and the rooms behind the auditorium, like the music room, and it was fascinating. The outside of that building does not do the inside justice. It's really fascinating inside. The architecture is of a different age, but it's once you're in there, you really appreciate the value of those buildings. So
And
I don't
what-
know if you wanted to add
What
something
I was
else.
struck by, in a very dramatic fashion, when Steve was bringing us through the building, was the intensity of usage that is currently going on in that gymnasium facility and the rooms directly around it. Also, you know, to a lesser degree in the auditorium itself, but that area is used on a full-time basis. I think it was 7 days a week for recreational programming, and with thousands of kids going through there every day, and that's, you know, really an eye-opener to see how valuable that gymnasium and the associated, you know, square footage has been for the community, even as part of that, you know, giant facility that's mostly empty.
May I add my thoughts? I was very impressed. And we didn't look at the school section at all, and I understand that's in more disarray. But my sense is that the gym and the auditorium are salvageable with a certain amount of upgrades and repairs and so forth, because I think there's a leak in the auditorium. And frankly, I found that auditorium much better conducive for the meetings as opposed to the new school. And that's just my sense. But I think it would be a travesty to tear those two sections down. The school, I have no idea, and I guess there's a report looking at that, a committee looking at that. But I would opt for a town meeting back at the auditorium once it's repaired and so forth. I thought they were both great spaces, and I was very impressed with everything that was reported of all the activities that go on. And there were hidden spaces there I didn't even know, behind the gym and so forth. So that was a treat. So thank you. I don't know how other people felt, but that was my impression.
I'll just echo Bob's comments. I was, with the recreation portion of it was, the amount of use that it gets is pretty amazing.
But the school part is not in, it's not salvageable.
Yeah, we didn't get in the school part. Well, they're doing a study on the entire building. But, you know, it looked like the gymnasium at least was in pretty good condition. And the auditorium, had like Lee said, had a couple of roof leaks, but the gymnasium looked like it was in pretty good shape. When do we get the final report on the condition of the building?
I think Bill's on top of that. Maybe you can give us a little update.
Yep.
Bill Scott, Assistant Town Administrator. We should have the report done by the end of January. One of the advantages we want to look at, though, is we want you to take a look at these facilities as if you can develop them, so you don't, you know, put ideas off the table because you have a report. So in the brainstorming session, think of everything. The report comes out, and then by the time you get to your sort of looking at 3, you'll understand the condition of the building. So we don't want to stop people from thinking outside the box. But end of January, we'll have the report.
And I had another kind of maybe question you might know that, the other thing that sort of stuck out a little at the site is the central location of the solar panel installation in terms of the site's disturbed area. I think it's very laudable, and, you know, and I really celebrate the fact that, you know, that renewable energy is on site. But it just struck me from a site planning standpoint, it's probably in one of the most inconvenient spots in terms of having to plan around it. And I didn't know if those, we're stuck with them for the next 20 years, or they could be moved or something or other. But they're just right in there.
I think there's, we've into 12 years on a 20-year lease. But again, everything is on the table as to what you can do with the site. I know I've heard discussions that if you want to sustain the solar panels, can you put them over the parking lots of the eventual development and therefore reduce the impermeable surface by stacking it? And, we are not taking up that space. So when we were in an early recreation meeting on this, people mentioned the same thing. Oh, that looks like the size of a field. So I think, again, you need to think as if you have the run of the site. And then the idea is each committee come back and then MUC with their consultant says, how do we fit this together?
May I ask a follow-up question on the solar panels? The solar panels outside of the ME school is one place, and then they're on top of the Medici school, or in the school facilities. And who benefits by those? The town, or the school system in the past, or where does that energy go?
I'm not sure of the revenue stream and energy. I know the ones on the top of the school might have to go by virtue of the roof that's there. But
Okay.
again, we need to look at this as if those aren't impediments to your ideas.
Okay.
So at this point, the chairs can hand it over to Barrett Planning.
And I'd like to, I don't know whether we start with Alexis, but I want to welcome the Barrett Planning Group. And again, we're delighted to have you to help. We've got so many different folks here, and maybe I thought I could turn it over to you to explain a little bit what
Sure.
our game plan is for today.
Yes. Let me just bring this a little closer. So thanks again for welcoming us here. My name, again, is Alexis Lanzolata, so it's good to see some of you again. I'm here with my colleague Fiona Gain, and she will be helping out today as we want to really kind of do a careful job documenting the input that we get. You may also remember my colleague Judy Barrett was on virtually last time. She is going to be working with us in between meetings to make sure that any of those kind of follow-up questions that come out of this discussion, we have her kind of expert guidance on as well. So she wasn't able to join today, but she's right along with us in this process. So thank you again for having us here. Before it kind of formally gets kicked over to us, I don't know who's I don't know if the attendees, I remember last time there was someone wasn't promoted, or I don't know if there's an eye on this.
Yep,
Okay,
she's
okay.
promoting.
Oh, okay,
So you
someone
can
has
vote.
the,
Yeah.
sorry.
Liam,
Just wanted to make
wanna
sure
go
it
to
wasn't.
PowerPoint?
Yes, sure, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, may I take it away then? Has it been formally
Sure,
kicked over to us?
that's right.
Okay, great. All right, thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh, I just gotta move this. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. That is weird. But okay.
Excuse
gonna
me,
go with it.
Mary, I have to ask, if we're going to use the paper, are we using non-toxic markers?
Yeah, if we do use markers, they are low odor.
Yes, thank you. We made sure all the ones that we brought are low odor.
I like grape.
I like non-scented.
All right, so I think what we wanted to do today to kind of kickstart the conversation, as you know, this meeting is meant to be where we run amok, where all of the ideas possible without, kind of limiting yourselves to, questions of whether can we use the building, can we not? We're really just trying to keep things broad and open right now. So that's the focus of today's meeting. In between now and the next meeting, we at Barrett and in consultation with staff get to do more homework, kind of investigating some of the questions that you may have, or coming up with examples of other projects that might be kind of reminiscent of some of the ideas that come out of today. So we'll be doing a lot of that work between meetings. So for now, just consider it's just kind of an open slate where we want to hear your ideas. I want to go over a little bit for kind of the discussion structure here, because I know Bill had provided this form that we just kind of wanted you to guide the conversation. You didn't need to fill it out or anything, but it was just wanted you to have it kind of ahead of time so you understood the sorts of things that we would be looking for input on. My understanding is that today our goal is for the ideas that we do discuss, we're going to be filling in kind of the front page. We have a note-taking spreadsheet on here that we'll project when it comes time for that. And then the questions on the back that, I got to figure out how to do this because the view changed on my end. Sorry, friends, let's see. So I'm trying to figure out why the view is different, and I confess I am not very PC proficient.
So you keep going and I'll.
Okay, sure. All right. So I know in the meeting materials, did our friends get the slides in advance or no? Okay, all right, great. So just so you know, there are a couple of minor changes. I put a draft on it just to give myself a little bit of that wiggle room, so I'll point those out to you. But essentially, we can also switch.
You can.
We can, or I can just give.
Is that your desktop?
A couple things.
A lot of stuff on there.
I don't know why it's.
2 or 3 solitaire.
Yeah, so I
Why
assume-
don't you start yours?
Yeah,
and
sure,
we
I
can
just
switch
will
over.
get a adapter.
Oh. It worked before.
Yes, it did. I don't know, I hope I didn't break it. All right.
So, everybody got the form,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And some people pass them in ahead of time. So Myra sent something in, Joanne Crowley sent something in, I sent something in.
All right. Thank you.
I don't know if it's gonna go up on the screen or not.
It should. There we go. Hooray. Thank you. All right, so kind of the idea that we're proposing for today, just so we can get through everybody's ideas, we did want to keep it as an open group for this time. It might lend itself better for the second meeting to do groups, but given that we knew this was going to be hybrid and televised, we wanted to keep the discussion open. But I'm going to just review some of the key facts that staff went over with you during the last meeting. So I took basically their kind of high-level findings, and I zoomed out even more just to kind of take away some of the things that I think would help frame the discussion a bit. And so this is where one of the differences is from the version you received in the packet. You'll notice under review of key facts, I added a bullet that just says compatible land uses. And so I know that's going to be something that we kind of look at between now and the next meeting, but I did just want to point out that is obviously something that I'm sure some of your ideas you may already be thinking about. So I didn't want to cut that out. So then when it comes time to do a group share, I know, as Mary said, some people submitted forms already, but we just want to go around and in one sentence ask you to just summarize what your basic idea is. And the reason we want to do that is so we can kind of see if there are overlapping ideas, and also just to get a sense of a number for how many ideas need to kind of be separately discussed versus discussed together. Because remember, for each idea, we will be documenting in a form for staff and for Bill and the MUC group as well. So We'll be doing that one sentence overview, and then we'll determine how to group them. And then we're just gonna, one idea at a time, do kind of a deep dive. So we're gonna be taking notes projected for visibility, so you can kind of correct us if we misrepresent something that you share. So what we would probably do at this time, if for example, a member of the Housing Trust has an idea, we'll kind of let them take the floor and explain it a bit. And you're welcome to either come up and add notes. I'll make sure to hand the mic over. We did put some tracing paper on that in case you wanted, if you had, dots, or we have markers as well, or just sticky notes. You certainly don't need to. I do suspect today it's just going to be a lot more talking, but that is available if it helps you kind of frame your idea for the group. So once we have gone through each idea one at a time, then when we kind of wrap up, we're going to ask you to share any questions or pieces of information that might be helpful for this group to be able to narrow it down to 3 ideas at the next meeting. So I mentioned that on the back of the sheet, that bill, I keep like plopping things down and losing where I'm putting things, but so on the back, the questions that are there, we already know we're going to be doing a little more homework on that, but maybe you'll have additional questions that you say, hey, maybe it'd be great if we had clarification on this particular grant program or something like that. So we'll conclude just by asking you to let us know if there's any questions or thoughts you want us to do a little more homework on. And then I think at that time, we will kick it back over to you wonderful people, and that will be the end of our show. But so for the first kind of key fact we wanted to go over, again, just a very, very high-level takeaway of the wonderful report that Kathy had prepared. Just kind of some of the big site condition things to keep in mind. One, there are wetlands on portions of the property, so that map is very helpful for seeing. I do have the map that was included in that packet on the next slide, but including priority habitat or critical natural landscape areas, so areas that have been recognized by the state as being especially important for providing natural landscapes and habitat. The entire site is within Zone 2 for multiple drinking water wells. It's another important thing to keep in mind, especially as we kind of filter through ideas talking about the needs for wastewater. The soils and the grades of the soils do not appear to be an impediment to development, and so that can be helpful to understand just in terms of, that's not going to be a big roadblock there. I think the bigger constraints on the site are going to be relating to those wetlands, the existing wells, and figuring out, how to make sure that the water resources are well protected in whatever goes forward. And then as we mentioned earlier, actually, the solar, there's the ground-mounted solar located on the property, and then thank you for pointing out the solar that is also currently on the roof of the building as well. So that's just kind of the physical constraints at the site, but then you also have kind of regulatory constraints. If you were to stick with development that is within the current zoning, what could you do? So it's zoned R40, it's within the Aquifer Protection District, so that has kind of additional constraints there as well, but within that R40, in that nice summary that you had been given last time, it went over things like, the lot size, I believe it's 40,000 square feet minimum, and then things like setback and building height. But in terms of the residential uses that are allowed, just by right, what could be done there, as long as it could fit on the site and within any of the requirements necessary, being in a Zone 2 and within the Aquifer Protection District. The uses that would already be allowed, single family, duplexes, accessory apartments, short-term rentals, and there are other residential uses that would be permitted by special permit. Now, in the zoning summary that you received last time, it did go over other uses, non-residential uses that are allowed by right or by special permit. I was trying to keep it residential focused for this slide, just zooming out even more. And then lastly, just something to keep in mind, depending on the scale of development, there might be other permitting and review that could be required. This group might decide that maybe sticking with the existing zoning isn't the avenue. Maybe it would be something like 40B or rezoning the area or something like that. But depending on the scale of the development, that could trigger other review, such as, for example, Cape Cod Commission needing to view it as a development of regional impact. So just, those are some of the broad site considerations. And so this map was also in that summary. And so just, seeing the school, those are some of the things that we mentioned, just the kind of the critical natural landscape area, and then the core habitat areas. So you can see a lot of the environmentally sensitive areas that need to be carefully considered. But we don't, today, again, while it's good to have that in mind, we're not going to focus so much on the placement on the site. You're going to assume that your ideas can go somewhere on the site. So let's just think about kind of the bigger ideas, and then when we talk more about feasibility on the next meeting, that's where we'll probably kind of look more within that context. But it's certainly good to have that background information about what does the site tell us now, what could happen now on the site, what would require additional, whether zoning changes or some other mechanism, some other permitting mechanism to create the type of housing that this group determines they want to include in a proposal for the MUC group. The other kind of, framework that we definitely want to look at are the housing needs, because this group is focused on housing of all of the land use teams for this process. The most relevant plan for us to look to is your recently approved housing production plan. It's great that it's new and recent, so you know that the findings in it are up to date. But kind of the key groups that the summary of the HPP that you had reviewed last time identified. I mean, Mary, you said it quite clearly last time, there's needs all around. So the plan identified the need for housing suitable for working individuals, families, single-person households, seniors, persons with disabilities, veterans and military families, those experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And when we get to talking about kind of feasibility, there are many groups within those who currently need housing where there are existing programs and resources that we could consider and bring forward as a potential road for meeting those needs. The plan also identified some pretty eye-opening affordability gaps, and I appreciate that this is just how the data is always evolving, because I think in the summary it had pointed out that the HPP had an ownership gap identified, and it's looking more like closer to, I think, the upper range that you had identified in that summary was a $300,000 affordability gap. And so that is typically looking at the area wages in relation to the housing market. That's how that gap is typically calculated. So whether you're talking rental or ownership, there's a pretty staggering gap between what is currently on the market versus what those working in your community or in the region could afford. The plan also, as a housing production plan is required to do, identifies a numerical goal for units that would be produced under the plan. So I just want to clarify for any listeners, when it talks about this 80% rental, 20% ownership, that breakdown is not saying that, town-wide, that's forever what we would like the breakdown of housing to be. That was specific to the 5-year numerical goal in the housing production plan, was suggesting based on the calculated gaps with different income levels and different housing needs, that of the affordable units produced under the plan, it makes sense to kind of focus on rental and expanding opportunities for that. With a lesser but still important focus on ownership. So that's what that 80-20% split is referring to. It's for the units that would be produced kind of under that plan. SHI eligible units would kind of fit that split. And I think, this is no surprise that for the rental, the focus was more about, all bedroom types, studios and one bedrooms, I'm sure, especially when you're talking about individual, people entering the workforce, or it might be older adults just needing a smaller place to downsize into. But you still have the need for those family rentals as well. But it was focused more on low-income households, whereas the ownership units that the plan targets was focused more broadly on low and moderate income. So those were kind of the targets identified in that plan, and that's a good thing to keep in mind, again, as you're thinking through what sorts of housing would be appropriate for this site, is just looking at what's been identified as a need for your community. Other guidance from the housing production plan. So in addition to meeting the 10% goal under Chapter 40B, the housing production plan included some other goals that are helpful to kind of frame the conversation, leveraging funds from multiple sources, so you can really kind of efficiently get the resources you need to make the housing you want happen. Promoting housing that is consistent with those local needs and with Yarmouth character. So really kind of looking at the built environment. And I think that's the other reason why I really appreciate the zoom out map as well is, it's not just about the site itself, it's looking at the surrounding community. And then seeking out innovative strategies to address housing needs with particular attention to some of those groups that have been identified. And then lastly, this one is really key. I just wanted to kind of emphasize it. Promoting smart growth development principles, including encouraging housing development that preserves open space and natural features. So I think staff's done a really good job outlining the priority, the parameters for that aspect already by really kind of mapping out what those environmentally sensitive areas are and understanding the existing, the presence of wells being in a zone 2 and the need to be very protective of those resources. And then, so now we go to that third category that I had added, so this wouldn't be on your printout, but just a reminder to, as we share our ideas today, also another kind of guardrail to have helping frame the conversation is compatibility with other land use teams. This is gonna come out more in the second meeting, but you might already have in your ideas, that might already be a part of your idea, so I didn't wanna cut that out of the conversation. So you might have an idea that talks about, I think 40R zoning, for example, was talked about on the zoning sheet from last time. So that would potentially then also cross over to some economic development. So your ideas might already be in that direction. And so just trying to, if your idea does have some connection to some of the other land use teams, and you already know that, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, we'll kind of brainstorm between meetings and see where those existing, where that overlap might exist. But so these are the other groups. So, we're the housing group, but your municipal services, economic development, recreation, education, open space, and water supply. So just really trying to think holistically, because that is the ultimate goal of the process. So any questions on kind of the background of the things that we want to think about when we plan for when we run amok with housing ideas, what kind of the pieces of information that we kind of summarized there for you before we go over what the discussion structure will look like?
Already.
Okay, great. And I couldn't have done that without the wonderful work of your staff with those reports they had prepared. So for the discussion structure, we just accomplished number 1, but for the group share, again, I would like to go around and just ask that you give a 1-sentence overview of your ideas with the group. And what that will allow us to do is to determine, we might have one totally different idea per person. We might have a lot of overlap, and so it'll just help us kind of frame how we're going to group this for purposes of the form. So, and this is where I just want to get up our note-taking sheet, so I might need to drag this around. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So, what I did was I took the first, the front page of the handout for the MUC group, and I just put it so that we could consolidate it all into one place. And I took the input that we received from the police chief.
Police chief.
Yeah,
Have it
and
ready.
just to show you how we'll take those notes. He didn't, he clearly, based on the information he gave, had considered the questions in the form, but we just put it in there. What we're going to do for each of these is we'll just say who the idea came from. We just gave it an idea title based on the project he described. We're just calling it Housing for Public Safety, School, Other Municipal Staff. That was the focus of his idea. Name of relatable plan or recent issue. So I think you'll tell us, of course, but a lot of it is going to be tying into that HPP again. That's really where your understanding of existing housing needs is going to be framed, right? Because so much work went into that. But then this is where we really want you to tell us what is your idea. So Chief Lennon had shared his general idea, housing for police, fire, DPW, et cetera, whether at Mattokees or another place in town. And then the housing should be both long-term and short-term information like that is so helpful to understand, because there's different processes and funds and things like that, depending on the type of housing. So getting that detail is very helpful. And his suggestion was a 10 to 20% set aside for school, town, or public safety personnel. Benefits of the idea: greater ability to attract and retain employees. So he had identified, the primary issue is the police department's challenges in attracting new employees due to the lack of housing available at an affordable price. Then the form asked you to consider possible constraints. And I will just say for that, it's okay if you haven't thought through that. If you have an idea you want to share and you haven't thought through what might be a limiting factor, that's totally fine. But,
But how did you define long-term and short-term?
so,
That
good
was in
question.
response to something I asked him.
Okay.
We talked about employee housing a little bit for town staff, and I asked him, if he needed something just for a short period of time, 3 to 6 months, until they find other housing,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And he said no. He said he needs both.
A lot of corporations do that.
Right, right. So
If
that
they're
was,
hiring
I
someone
led
new,
him
they
to that.
provide housing for a month or two, whether it be for a single person or their family to get acclimated with the area and find a place to live permanently.
Because that would change the number that you would set aside on the site, right? For municipal, if you went that way, for municipal employees.
And then the possible constraints and singular idea or part of larger idea. So he had shared, just as something to consider, not necessarily a constraint, but helpful information would be looking at the potential increase in call volume for PD and the fire department as just, again, not a constraint, but information that would be kind of important to have for planning purposes. And then lastly, singular idea or part of larger idea. So I just added, that was the last question on the front of that sheet, just to note that he had shared, if not at this site, if this site ends up getting used for something else, that is, a big piece to consider. So what I'm gonna do super duper quickly is try to fix what's going on here with, so that we can, I wanted to mirror, I think, Fiona, just so you're not seeing two different things, because I think that'd be really confusing. And,
Display settings.
yep. Usually it has, display settings, and then if I do mirror, why do I not?
Do some people have the forms filled out already, or?
Some people did, they sent them in already.
Well, so, Fiona, I'm speaking just
Joanne
not
did, there's blank forms over there, if everybody needs them.
Great.
I filled it out. I didn't know I should have submitted it, but
Oh,
it all filled out.
I appreciated that some people did, but I'm so eager to
Drives me
ask everybody
insane,
what they
because
thought.
I don't know how. Oh, it looks like it's going left to
Because
right, just so you know. Okay, so if you don't see it, bring it over to the right.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So, again, I just want to kind of go around and we can just start here if that's okay. And if you don't mind saying your
Completed mine. I completed.
first and last name as Fiona and I continue to learn about, to learn your wonderful faces.
Pass them
That'll help
around.
us. So
Pass these in case anybody needs
you
some.
might need to scroll up. Is my
Yes.
trackpad the opposite of yours?
It's a little.
I know, it's really wonky.
I got
Yep. I know, it is weird.
I'm
This is
taking
where
notes,
yours
too.
might be better than my, now it's like,
It's just lagging. a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, anyway, well, we're figuring that out. We would love to go around and hear from you, and I'll just take notes the old-fashioned way in the meantime.
Sure. Josh Trott from Community Housing Committee. I'm also an employee at Housing Assistance Corporation. We were trying to get another representative from HAC here today, but we're in the middle of a big move, so nobody could get away from the office right now. Of course, I'm interested in both multifamily and single-family housing on a property like this. We have some good examples like Mashpee Village, 1 Wampanoag Road, which has centrally located multifamily housing surrounded by a ring of single-family and duplex housing that gives kind of both opportunities for rentals and home ownership. Although I really like the idea of a set-aside for local town officials and town workers, it's always scary to tie housing into a job, and if that job doesn't work out, does that mean you lose your house? So that's always a concern I have when something like that is brought up. Now, short-term housing, 3 to 6 months while they try to figure something out, I think that's a lot of a safer bet than long-term housing. But it's a large property, and there's a lot of opportunity for housing here. I think it being pretty centrally located in town also makes it attractive to a wide variety of different people.
Okay, great. So for purposes of kind of naming that idea, you mentioned multifamily and single family, and you referenced Mashpee Village as an example of that.
Yep.
So I'm going to call that idea, just that multifamily, single family combined site. And then if anyone else similarly has that, we might group those together when we go for a deeper dive discussion. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
My name is Drew Kraus. I'm the representative of the Yarmouth Housing Authority on the Community Housing Committee. Joe Glynn is also here by Zoom on the Yarmouth Housing Authority. I have lots of ideas. I'll just pick one, and that I got from Mary, which is the idea of housing for veterans who are in danger of being homeless. There's a program that we've been investigating or started to investigate that has Soldier On, and its headquarters are in Western Mass, and it has developments in Boston and around, and that's one possibility we thought of.
Okay, great. So housing for veterans. So we have multifamily, single family combined on the site, housing for veterans. Now, you mentioned you have other ideas.
No, that was my one sentence thing for now.
Yeah,
Let's keep
so,
moving.
yeah, thank you. Now,
Okay.
your first and last name, just for
Yep,
we get.
Bob Lawton on the Affordable Housing Trust. And the simple sentence would be, I would be suggesting to have affordable housing on 1 or 2 sites on this larger property, depending upon what happens with the solar field, et cetera, and keeping the auditorium and the gym.
Okay.
So I think you can do that, because you can do anything, I suppose, at this point. But I would do that. The classrooms you'd probably get rid of, and then have somebody design where the housing would go on the site.
Okay, wonderful. So you're already kind of thinking ahead to specific sites on the property, well, not necessarily specific sites, but you mentioned, where the solar is, depending on what goes with that. But, so potentially having just affordable housing and maintaining the gym and auditorium. So affordable housing with the, I would say, gym and auditorium intact can be the idea title. So see, we already have 3 different ideas, and there certainly could be overlap. Like, there's no reason these are distinct from each other, and we will figure that out in our meeting number 2. But right now, to really flesh out, after we get through our one sentence kind of go around, right now we have these kind of 3 buckets so far.
Great, and I'm Robert Rittenauer, Town Administrator and Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. I had a number of ideas that overlap both with the ideas that have been expressed already and with each other. And I do want to say, I definitely had the town employee housing on there, and also with the flexible design that has clustered units that are available, and also some potential single-family units. And I think it's important to assist in the recruitment and retention of municipal staff. I also had...
How many forms did you do?
1, 2, 3, I only have 4 or 5 ideas, but they're all like, kind of, some of them are the usual suspects. I'd like to see some rental housing that really gets to the heart of our HPP. But I would stress that I feel strongly that we should try to adopt a mixed income model, that doesn't just focus at, for the regular rental that we do on mixed income. I have another idea more for the lower income, but I do think to have clustered units of rental housing for mixed income, maybe condo style, with the family size mix as well, it just helps to build, a stronger community, and not, I'm kind of concerned on having a situation where there's more homogeneous type of housing in that area that is separated from other parts of the community. And I do want to mention two things under, describing the idea that, one of them that I thought Mary had brought up when we had our meeting out at the site, that I just thought was a very excellent line of thinking, is to try to focus on the areas of the site that have been developed and disturbed. It's really a beautiful site. And when you're out there, you get a feeling for the vastness of it. Just looking around, and you're looking at all of the area that has been developed and cleared, and it's quite large. And then what you realize when you look at the plans, that represents but a small share of the entire property, which is beyond that tree line, which is beautiful, and there are some very unique natural areas associated with that. So to the extent that we could really focus on the disturbed areas, it was mentioned the value of the gymnasium / auditorium, and I would hope that could be retained as a community center, not just even as it is, but maybe with the addition of some additional classroom space. There is some nice, you get a sense of with some of the ancillary rooms surrounding that. But if there was more of that, you could do some additional programming in a community center. And so I think the mixed income rental would be very valuable. I want to throw on the table, and I'm just so delighted to have strong representation from the Yarmouth Housing Authority here. I'd like to put up as one of my brainstorming ideas to work to develop some housing authority units on this parcel, which these would be the units that would be really geared towards more of the low-income population. And there's significant subsidies available for that there are strong needs. And I think that age-restricted is possible under that scenario, which is also another good benefit for our community. And I do want to say is that, in recent years, we've sort of been plagued by siting issues with the Housing Authority. It's almost as if we can't even hold a public meeting without tearing each other to shreds. And, the one public meeting that we did have, over 200 people attended, and not one single person would speak on behalf of or in favor of the Housing Authority. And I thought that was a very poor situation, that we'd like to maybe work more closely with the Housing Authority to collaborate and to bring them into the a community-wide process, that we would generate support for those units, and that maybe if we were able to develop a close enough relationship to transfer the proposed development from the existing Housing Authority parcel and maybe leave that undeveloped and move it up to this location and work as an entire community, it just may be a way to overcome some of the folks that have had opposition to the Housing Authority process, but it represents a strong need in our community. So I'd like to see if we could work on that. And I think again, it's almost following some of what Bob was saying, is that not just have one situation on the Mattakey site, but to analyze a couple of almost like neighborhoods there that would have some, mixed income rental, some lower income, perhaps Housing Authority sponsored units, and could contemplate town employee housing, whether it's on the rental side or also another smaller component that would be some duplex and clustered single-family home ownership opportunity units, so that we would almost match, you know, in the HPP, there was kind of an 80-20 split. We know that the rental is our big need, but we also have a home ownership opportunity program, and that also may be a nice way to buffer the site from some of the existing residential development in the neighborhood, is to have some of those clustered homeownership opportunity units that might be geared toward moderate income folks, town employees, and that type of thing. And so those are a couple of ideas, but as you can see, I think it kind of builds on Bob's notion of
Yep.
potentially like neighborhoods that work.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, I think one distinct idea that I definitely want to pull out and talk more about when we do the deeper dive is the housing authority. To me, that's very specific in terms of, and we want that. So I'm separating that out. And then some of the other ideas, as you mentioned, I think there's overlap as well with existing ideas, but also just things that aren't necessarily, you know, the idea of town employee housing, for example. That's something that we can talk about kind of as its own distinct thing. But then you're also talking about things relating to kind of the site layout and design, and that's another consideration. And so I think I'm just, as this is the challenge for us to kind of live think through how to group these, and I think it's coming to me as I hear more ideas. So just in the interest of time, as we continue to zip through, if we just try to like super quick snapshot to help us kind of group these, and then we'll reorganize and figure out how to flesh out some of these a bit more. And again, if you could just first and last.
Lee Hamilton, a member of the Community Housing Committee, and the representative from that committee onto the Community Preservation Committee. And my thought is a joint project with Habitat for Humanity in the Community Housing Committee. And single homes, of course, and their income is 60 to 80% of the area median income, and the rental housing to be a mixture, of low income, medium income, and maybe market rate, some market rate. And I have a lot more ideas, which, given, you know, I don't know how much I can express right now, but I have a lot of other ideas on solar panels on the rental buildings, solar panels. I think Habitat in all their new construction, they put solar panels on each home, I believe.
Okay.
And I have lots of other, and often you have local preference for people who work or live in the town or have children that go to the school system in the town. And I have other ideas, but I'll try to refrain from.
No, I think we will get to them all. I'm just trying to think, this is just helpful for us to think about what things to group. So for example, we've heard a couple of people now talk about the idea of having both, you know, multifamily rental, perhaps single-family ownership as well on the same site, and you specified partnering with Habitat for that. So again, it's just helping see where these ideas connect.
Because Habitat comes with packages.
Right.
With volunteers, and, you know, I guess most people are aware of what they do. But they sometimes draw in other funding, but they come with a lot of packages.
Right.
And if they can get the land, that's a plus, so.
Yeah, and outside of that, unfortunately, funding sources for ownership for affordable ownership are limited. So Habitat is a different, like you said, they have kind of they operate in this very kind of well-oiled machine because they have existing.
And I had wished I had thought of recommending Habitat be at the table today, and I sent that to Mary today, because this came to me over the weekend, and I thought.
Yep, I passed on that invitation today.
Yeah.
They were busy, but they did say, yes, we're willing to partner with the town
If that's
the
what gets
direction that
approved,
we
but I
take.
thought
So
that
that's
was
great.
an innovative way to think about.
And their headquarters is located in Yarmouth-Port, so.
Okay, I have a lot more, but I'll hold it.
Okay, no, great. So just to zoom out as we continue to go around. So we've talked about multifamily and single-family both being on the site. People have expressed ideas about different income levels. I heard a desire to have more mixed income on the rental if ownership were a part, you had suggested that would be, in accordance with Habitat's model, 60 to 80%. But so that idea of mixed housing typologies on the site has come up. The idea of partnering with the housing authority has come up. Veterans housing has come up. So I'm thinking big here right now, and we will get to all of these wonderful details, I promise. But I would say as we go around, if someone has something that doesn't fit into one of those big buckets, let us, let's talk through that. So,
Barbara.
Well, I'm just going to say that Barbara and myself are on the Mattakese
Okay.
Utilization Committee, and
Sure.
we are enjoying immensely listening to you.
great, wonderful, thank you.
Joanne Crowley, the Planning Board representative on the Community Housing Committee. And the idea that I submitted to Mary is a village of homes, small homes, each with an ADU. A private development of single-family homes, with each having an affordable, non-seasonal ADU rental. The lot size would have to maybe be a half an acre, with appropriate parking areas and green space required. The homes should probably be no larger than 1,200 square feet, and the ADUs no larger than 600. Some of the benefits: smaller homes might be more affordable, and the rental income from the ADU will help offset costs of ownership. And affordable ADU rents could be attractive to municipal employees and others. Some of the constraints, of course, are we need wastewater running down Higgins Kroll Road, and the zoning bylaws would have to be adjusted. And I will say, quite honestly, I had this idea before I read in the Cape Cod Times about what Marston Mills is doing with their elementary school. And this is relatively recent. The Barnstable Town Council has 3 conceptual proposals out for that site where the school has already been demolished. And one of them is housing with ADUs. But I did think of it before I read this.
That is so great.
But it's, I was glad that there was,
Somebody else did
others much smarter than me thinking about this, so that's my idea.
Don't know.
That's a great story.
Wonderful.
I never got to
Mary has the
finish.
write-up, by the way.
Yes, yep, and she shared, yeah, thank you so much. So, single-family, a village of single-family homes with an ADU, I think that is a great idea to explore. This is good, these really kind of specific yet often overlapping ideas.
Kathy Williams, town planner. One sentence is extremely difficult for me, so it's going to be a giant run-on sentence. I think one of the things that we've been looking for many, many years is using town land for housing. So I kind of went a little bit bigger in some of the ideas. So a smaller scale project might be 70 to 100 units on 6 to 8 acres. A larger scale might be 120 to 150 units on 10 to 12 acres. We want to be respectful of the neighborhood, but we want to get some density going here on such a large tract of land. I want to be sure that it solves the most urgent needs. Workforce housing is a huge need. It's really impacting our businesses. It's impacting the ability for the town to hire people. And eventually it's going to impact every single one of us when we can't go to the grocery store anymore. We aren't able to get our hair cut and that type of thing. So workforce, seniors, and vets, I think, are some of the more urgent needs. I also agree with the mixed income, maybe 25 to 30%, capital A affordable. I'm looking to provide rentals or a mix of rentals and home ownerships. I'd like to include some smaller units for seniors and singles. They don't need a lot of space. They want to keep the rent low. So let's give them a little bit more cozier spaces. Want to be sure that it's environmentally sustainable, so solar energy efficient, has that wastewater connection, and then also has some open green space for a nice living. And then also consider a mix of housing types, whether it's tiny homes, duplexes, townhouses, or multifamily apartments. One of the ties to something else might be, depending on what comes up out of the economy team, might be top-of-shop housing, if they're interested in doing something on the bottom. Obviously, the benefits of the idea is it really uses town land to help solve a workforce housing problem that impacts our economy. Possible constraints are, can we find funding sources for this type of housing? because the costs for construction are so high. Obviously, giving them a free chunk of land is huge, but I'm not sure whether that would be enough. And then, of course, we need the wastewater connection. I have a bunch of other ideas, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Hi, I'm Greg Wheeler. I'm a member of the Yarmouth Community Housing Committee. Great ideas. You stole all of my ideas. Not all of them. I wanted to go first, you know.
It was nice to go first.
Hey, yeah, I went out there a couple of times, and my first thought was to raise the school, but I had not been inside, so I didn't see the gym or the auditorium. So
Changed my mind.
It changed my
When
mind.
Greg and I
hearing-
went out Thursday, we were like, get rid of this thing. And then when we went inside, it changed our
You
mind.
don't get this opportunity again for 50 years, maybe, you know, so, but without seeing the inside, I feel like maybe we shouldn't raise it, but I think municipally employee housing is huge. That was my number one. I would also add maybe hospital workers over in Hyannis, first responders. Couple of things, personal, I'm a huge proponent of tunnels to towers. I think that that would be a good partner over there. I would include elderly and disabled housing. I delivered some meals Christmas morning. Some of the conditions people live in, decrepit. I mean, humans shouldn't be living this way. So I'd like to see maybe a little bit of everything, veterans, affordable, municipal, elderly, disabled. That's a big space. I get it that it's not all housing. I've got many other ideas that are non-housing, but those are, I guess, fantasies of this meeting, so.
Those are good to bring in, because we honestly, for example, having that connection, we want to hear, even though this is going to be a part of the second meeting, but if you already know areas where this connects to other land use teams, that's great to get that out there, like Kathy talking about the potential for top-of-the-shop housing,
Okay, so
municipal.
I'm going to add an ellipsis to my sentence.
You
We'll
go
just
for
carry
it.
this on. A year-round indoor, outdoor pickleball tournaments would bring people in, maybe a mini sports arena, maybe carnivals, fairs, Memorial Day through Labor Day, a gym, fitness area for Yarmouth residents, a youth center, arcade, get kids out of the house and away from screens. I get it, a lot of the stuff would need special zoning. Small concert venue. That amphitheater is awesome if you put some seats in there and ramp it up a little bit. Local farmers could have, artisans could have a little, maybe, you know, marketplace there. Maybe a winter homeless shelter, get people out of the woods and into a warm place. And lastly, maybe some kind of a petting zoo. Bring kids in that maybe don't get to see goats and stuff like that. So I guess that would be the end of my sentence.
So I'm glad that you shared all of those, because in my mind, that fleshes out another idea to continue discussing, which is really kind of creating a shared, almost a village, if you will, that has, right. So I think that in and of itself is an idea to flesh out further. So thank you for.
If you had family housing next to elderly housing, you know, kids could, I mean, there's a lot of things that could
Right,
fit
right.
in there. It would be a community, like you said.
Great.
I'm John Barr, the chair of the Community Housing Committee. And when we were out there last week, one thing, the size of the parcel is pretty amazing. And when we got inside to the gymnasium, it kind of completely turned around, tearing down the entire thing for me. What I was thinking about was raise the school with the exception of the gymnasium. The auditorium might also stay if it's economically repurposed. And I was thinking of creating a village center on this portion of the site consisting of a community center, sort of like Harwich has, maybe centralizing the library, provide, daycare center, possible wellness center, transportation stop to Route 28 system, some small shops maybe, housing could be, top of the shop type housing in that area, and then looking at trying to maximize, this is probably the last large parcel like this that is going to be around for a while, and so maybe looking at housing in the density similar to like Yarmouth Commons, but how, and then other types of maybe tiny housing and other things over and above that. But, and meeting all the needs that we talked about in the HPP. If the school is to be rebuilt, maybe push it all the way back to the east side of the site and consolidate the.
That's the ME Small School, right?
Pardon?
You mean the ME Small School? Yeah, right.
And maybe consolidate the athletic fields and everything between that and Higgins Kroll Road to free up more of the site.
Okay, and Higgins Kroll, that's the one to the,
South, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
No.
gotcha, okay. All right,
Yeah, south.
great. So,
Did you type those all up?
Hmm?
Did you type those up?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, pass them in. There's a couple of other people.
yep. So we also, I wasn't sure, nope, okay.
Mary, should I have
Well, I
typed
think the
mine?
fire department needs to
Well, I think
talk about, is that a good idea to have municipal housing? Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
Well, I'm not really going to say anything any different than what's already been said here. I think, following along with what Chief Lennon said is a lot of what's weighing on my mind. Municipal housing is a great idea. There's a lot of really good ideas that are floating around here. In the back of my mind, the one thing I'm thinking of is call volume for us and demand. So that's sticking up front in my.
Oh, the
my head.
impacts that
The
this would
impacts of
have
what this
on
would
your
have.
department, okay.
Absolutely. But other than that, there's a lot of great ideas that are going around and a bunch of them that I agree with. So I don't have much more to say than that right now.
Okay. So you mentioned there was some.
Spyro, did you want to say anything?
Since you're asked. I'm wondering if I'm the only alumni of Mattakese Middle School here today. Because I'd like to see this continue as an educational facility. And I think even today, after it hasn't been used for almost 5 years, you'll be impressed with the school building that's still there. I was taken by a couple of comments that were made that if you have been to town meeting, you'll notice the difference with the previous location and how well the old Mattakese Middle School lends itself to town meeting. So should definitely look at maintaining portions of these buildings for those types of uses, whether they're educational or not. But as an alumni, the only thing I want to leave you with is that in 1970, the architecture of that school was inspiring, at the very least. You have to think of it in terms of being 4 foot or 5 feet tall, walking through that building. So it may continually lend itself to an elementary school. The last time we had this conversation about this building was trying to decide what to do with the intermediate school. And what we discovered, it was going to cost about $50 million to rehab Mattakese so that it could continue on as a fully functional educational facility. It's going to be expensive if you want to keep it a school, but if you want to consider additional other uses between preschool, adult education, the community college has run out of classrooms because of the demand that they've now gotten for the free tuition program. If you've ever been to the charter school on Main Street in Hyannis, a derelict Mattakese Middle School is palatial compared to what they're doing there and graduating 100 kids a year with both high school and IB diplomas. So there's lots of different options if you'd like to keep it keep the facility and use it for educational purposes. Rent out the auditorium, rent out the dining room. You can have meetings with food where we typically don't have the opportunity to do that. So visit the cafeteria when you take the tour as well, because it lends itself to outside meetings as well. There's tons of parking, which is very hard to find as well. And speaking in terms of wastewater resources that we're looking for in town to accommodate the sewer project, this might be a location to locate some of that infrastructure. And That open space is extremely valuable, whether you keep it for recreational purposes. I happen to have played on all of those fields between football, soccer, and baseball, and they're still there. But you may just want to keep it available for future uses. We may have a high interest and demand for housing today, but we're not quite sure what the needs are going to be 40 and 50 years from now. So let's not develop the whole thing right away and then not have those opportunities available to us in the future. Anyways, thanks for the 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mary, was there anyone on the Zoom?
Yeah, there's definitely people on the Zoom.
From the,
So I think we
Housing
should
Committee?
start with Myra, because she's a committee member.
Okay, I was very specific, and it was geared to a certain population rather than, where to locate things and what to build. But I really see a great need for more senior housing, the small units, affordable up to like 80% AMI. But, what Greg said is so true. There are older people, usually women, living in really horrible conditions. And, you just see that in all the towns. But the thing I was thinking, if we were lucky with our local preference, we might get some folks that are living here in town now that could rent one of the new apartments, and then their house, which they probably weren't able to take care of, could maybe get rehabbed and back on the market, and that would free up some more housing for other people. But basically, it's just a particular group that I'm very concerned about, and that's basically what I outlined.
Okay, and I just want to, we have 35 more minutes. Yeah. Okay. We have 2 more people that are on Zoom. We have Joe Glynn, and then we'll go to Jim Seymour. Joe, can you unmute?
I can. Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes, I can. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Mary. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for the invitation, and I want to thank you all for your commitment to this, important community discussion. It's always difficult to follow Spiro at any time, but I'll try. I didn't bring any boxing gloves, Bob, but I'm always up for a good fight. But I think here there are just so many great people of good faith, and I'm confident there's going to be a great outcome. So I wanted to thank you all in advance. I am also I'm the vice chair of the Yarmouth Housing Authority, but Drew's doing a great job representing us there. But I'm also on the school committee, and I'm the liaison to the select board. So although I'm not officially recognized from the school committee to speak to you guys, I will be reporting back to the school committee as a selectman liaison. So when you report or when Bob reports to the select board, I'll report that back to the school committee. I don't have an answer. I did have the answer, but I don't have it in my pea brain about the solar panels. But there's also solar panels at the high school, and that was part of the discussion about Station Ave and the schools, which obviously you all know between Emmy Small and Station Avenue, that's going to be part of the overall discussion. And so my ideas go to the larger idea. I think I want to encourage ambitious thoughts, and I think that's what we're hearing here, to dream big, because, it's truly brainstorming. And I think often we assume from the outset that the best results are no one gets everything and that they want, but everyone gets something. But sometimes only the one thought gets through because it's the best idea. But I think that the combination of ideas, and I think there's funding to go with multiple ideas. If you bring in state government and other resources, state housing, all of that stuff, it makes your life difficult, going through that feasibility. But, money is obviously always part of the thing. So my ideas are encompassing them all. Daycare, the teachers can be thrown into those municipal employees that we need to retain, because we're dealing with that, retaining teachers here on Cape. So that can be thrown in with the first responders, and I like the idea about the healthcare. But, you know, housing complexes, veterans housing with support services. I honestly believe that a community village center that which was referenced is the way to go here. A complex that can be expanded, so maybe you address those fire issues. As a former firefighter, I identify with those. But, you know, you can grow with it, so you can do it in stages. But regardless of what comes about, I honestly feel you got a great group of people that are unmatched anywhere. So you'll come up with a good idea. But I think dream big and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And how about Jim?
Good afternoon, folks. Mary, thank you for the invitation. I'm also a Yarmouth resident, so I figure I have a little bit of skin in the game on a bunch of different angles. I just have a couple of observations. In the veteran sphere where we are, food insecurity has become an exponential growth. We've grown 200% in about a year and a half, and our average food pantry client is 69 or 70. So when we start to look at decisions and choices, I think we have to look at the economically challenged populations. And that's two different groups, I think. I think it's the folks that are currently housed in maybe single-family homes that they're overhoused or they can no longer afford it, provide them with some options, maybe one component. And I'm not just talking about veterans. I think what I'm seeing is probably a small representative of 6 to 8% of the entire population. The second piece is I agree wholeheartedly with Police Chief Lennon and the Deputy Fire Chief. A lot of veterans would love to come back and serve in public safety, but they can't afford to live here. And it gets back to the even broader scope of workforce housing. Cape Cod Healthcare has 600 job openings on an average day if you look on their website. So I think there's two different pieces to this. Is the economically challenged constituencies in the workforce. And I think how you maximize reasonably and responsibly the housing on this property is the right move. I recognize there are some other ideas and some possibilities, but those two constituencies are things that I'm seeing on a regular basis, and they're growing exponentially. And I think it's just going to both, particularly the first one I mentioned, the food insecurity. It's cheaper to keep somebody in the house than ultimately, if we can't figure all that out, you're going to see a greater influx of folks looking for affordable housing at an elderly rate or an elderly age range, excuse me. Thank you for your time.
And so I have a couple of notes from somebody who couldn't be here today. Pam is traveling today, but and I will get these to you. She sent in 3 really great ideas. Of course, Pam, right? It's all detailed. I'll just read the title. The first one is Senior and Intergenerational Living Community. Next one is Housing Commercial Hybrid. So that must be mixed use. Right? And the last one was Affordable Living Initiative, which I think we'll need her to explain.
So I think the third one, I think.
The third one, Housing Living
you
Initiative.
rent.
Oh, yes.
You rent, and part of the rent is put aside towards a down payment.
Oh.
You're allowed to live someplace for a certain amount of time, say 5 years.
And she said it
money's
was.
set aside.
It was pad split, which would be like, isn't that congregate housing? Where
So-
people have private rooms, bedrooms, but they share the living room and the kitchen?
Well, I think you're going back to her first idea, multi-generationals, where you put maybe younger people and older people,
Yeah.
and they kind of learn from each other. The younger person teaches the older person about technology, things
Yeah.
like that. And I'm not sure what us old-timers would teach any kids nowadays, but
Yeah, she brought up that idea of
outside.
not
Yeah,
every
exactly.
unit, like you would share the kitchen and the living room and the common space, but you would have your own private living area and bathroom. And that might be a way to, would never get those on the inventory, I just want to tell you right now. But that might be a way to house people that need temporary housing, people who are just starting out. You noticed on our list, the one category of people we didn't have in our HPP was young people. And they're the people that lead, they're the people that are causing.
And that's part of the home ownership. If you
Yeah.
could put them someplace where a portion of the rent is put aside that they can save. A lot of times that down payment is the biggest hurdle in home ownership for people.
And I
And
do-
it's hard to save money when you're paying astronomical rent, right?
The other thing I wanted to comment on your site plan, you see that this is very different than all the other sites that the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Housing Committee has looked at. We've looked at sites that have been very, very visible, right? This site is surrounded by trees, so it's just an opportunity to try something different, such as height, density, that kind of stuff. We're not constrained by, our Route 28 corridor. When we put housing there, we're very sensitive to making it fit in. This, you're surrounded by forests. So, for example, if you needed to have some type of architecture that lent itself to being highly energy efficient and producing energy on site, this is the site to try it out in town, because it has trees around it. So it's a little, that different type of architecture would be softened. And I don't know if it would help everybody if we listed out sites that are already developed and the density there. So this site, I was thinking, 6 to 10 acres for housing, with the density 6 to 10 units per acre. But if you max that out, that'd be 100 units of housing, right? So it might be good if we show you some pictures of what density we have in town already, and what does it look like, and what does it feel like? And other places on the Cape. What does it really mean to be 6 units per acre, 10 units per acre, 16? We allow up to 22 on Route 28. Like, what would that mean for this site? What would it mean to build up rather than build out? Just to think about that a little bit.
How high can we build up?
Well, so Yarmouth Commons has one 3-story building.
And that's the max, 3
Well,
stories.
you can, with Chapter 40B, you could go higher,
Your
but.
zoning, it's
Yeah.
35?
35
35
Yeah.
feet, yeah.
Three-story, 35.
Yeah, but I think
Not
that's,
non-residential. You might change it, or it'll be a 40B or a 40R or something like that.
if you've never, so Yarmouth Commons, you can't go in the buildings, it's a private spot. But if you've ever kind of gone in and parked in the parking lot to see, there's two 2-story buildings. And then the one kind of in the rear to the side is 3-story. But they did the architecture in such a way that it's softened, it's nice. And when you're in between all 3 buildings, it kind of feels nice. I like it. I like it. So if you want to know what a 3-story building would feel like on the Cape, go to 881 Route 28.
And that's like 16 units per acre. right?
That's 16 units per acre. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the way that I've heard all this input, I'm kind of putting it in these buckets of some of the really big ideas that people care about in the planning for this site, kind of in a more general sense, so I'll talk about that. But then I also heard some very specific ideas, and I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So first, I want to talk about the big general ideas we heard, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's agreement or anything. It's just that these are some of the bigger, not so focused on a really specific path of development, but just generally, these are some priorities that I'd like to see on this site. So, I think we heard about several groups with specific needs that people, depending on their kind of vision, wanted to prioritize. Seniors, persons with disabilities, veterans, and so we heard some of that need, the workforce. So that's, I think, in my mind, a big idea. That's not necessarily tied to some extent, I mean, the building type, obviously, especially if you're talking about senior or disabled housing, there's, you know, and you're talking about accessible living, there's going to be factors there. But that's outside of things like income levels and things like that, potentially. That's kind of another big idea bucket. But so specific population needs that people wanted to make sure were, whose needs were addressed. Also heard about kind of a desire to address different income levels, and sometimes that was tied to specific ideas with housing types. So, you know, talking about, you know, lower income households, whether that might be, you know, more appropriate for ownership versus rental, things like that. But in general, a desire to use the site to meet a breadth of income needs. And again, it doesn't mean there's consensus on that, just a big idea that we heard. A desire to kind of design with kind of considering the context of the site and using it in a way that allows for, you know, protection of some areas and finding the places that would be most suited for particular types of housing to allow for kind of mixed building typologies potentially. So multiple participants mentioned the idea of having kind of some multifamily, some single family, maybe some duplexes, just kind of the general idea of having mixed housing typologies was another kind of, again, big picture idea. Also, a big picture idea that we heard was the idea of kind of making sure that any planning was energy efficient, prioritized, you know, protecting green space. So really looking at kind of the green design in planning for the site. So none of these things necessarily are mutually exclusive. That's why I'm talking about them as big ideas rather than some of the specific ones I'm going to call out in a minute. So in other words, these things can have a lot of overlap. They can be brought into some of the specific ideas, but those are big ideas. And then some of the specific needs that we noted, or I'm sorry, specific ideas that were brought up that could kind of be more vetted as, if we want to look at a very specific scenario to bring forward. One of them, this idea of the single-family housing with ADUs, having that be kind of a priority use for part of the site. Looking at potentially partnering with the housing authority for a portion of the site. And again, that doesn't mean those two can't both exist. I'm just saying those are really specific things that I wanted to call out. The idea of including broader community uses, whether it be mixed, you know, having like a mixed use, top of the shop housing we heard, or preserving some municipal or recreational uses, or expanding on them. So in my mind, I actually put that kind of under specific because in my mind, that kind of goes with like, okay, a specific idea would be housing and preserving, say, the auditorium and the gymnasium. Like, we can go in multiple directions with an idea that has that, but that's like a specific channel that we might want to kind of lock into. So in terms of the big ideas that I talked about, considering specific groups, populations, things like that, a range of income levels, having kind of mixed housing typologies, prioritizing energy efficiency, green space. Are there any of those kind of bigger zoomed out things? Because I know people were saying there's other things I'd love to share, but bigger picture things that you'd want to, that I didn't capture there.
I would want to see some of the units be ADA compliant.
Okay, okay.
And that would be some, I don't know, whatever, how many home ownership houses are developed, at least one of them, and some of the rentals. I think that's something that gets overlooked. And I also, in my notes, recommended some units be reserved for veterans as well.
Yes, yep, so.
I know that came up in other things.
Yeah, yep.
Some of the topics we've gone off, I mean, some of that's recreation and some of that's not the domain of this group.
Right.
But I I'm not sure about having private businesses and so forth, like Top of the Shop, and the town property like that. I'm sorry, Kathy.
I wasn't suggesting it, I'm just saying that's how you could combine the two.
I know, but I'm not sure. I mean, some things like Park and Rec are the ones who would look at doing some of the other things. Our focus is really on housing. But
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what this committee should focus. There was a lot of nice other ideas, but that's for the other groups to come up with, is my sense.
So I think, so there's kind of then two avenues for the mixed, the potential for mixed uses. One is housing with municipal, like recreation, things like that.
Yeah.
And then there's another avenue, which is kind of going even beyond that, housing and potentially other uses, which you're suggesting isn't kind of the purview of this group. That might be a later.
And hopefully we'll work in unison with the other groups to see what they come up with, because I do think there could be more of a youth center, but that doesn't fit under the realm of housing. There could be more facilities. They do pickleball, by the way, at the gym.
What about village center? Yeah, so that would, you're talking about private businesses being
Yeah,
involved.
potentially, but I mean, a lot of the, there would be a community center like Harwich, and then maybe other things that kind of feed off of that. But I mean, even having like a convenience store there, small stores that serve the housing, and, yeah.
Bill had his hand up, Alexis. He's-
I think the way to maybe organize this is a sorry about that. There's the topology of the type of development. So you've got the rental units, you've got the individual houses with the ADUs, and that could be in the rows, and across the top could be the demographic of the population, and then just basically say, where is there the best fit for each of that? So if you have apartments, you could have apartments for veterans, you could have them for seniors and everything else, so you can try to structure the development so it adapts to all that. So then you begin to understand, if I'm going to have this type of development, what kind of demographic does it serve?
Right, thank you. And then I think also this is where it's really, I feel like meeting two is going to have so much to discuss, because we just know also from the perspective of what resources are available to fund some of these things, that there are sometimes limitations, and marketing, the way that you have to approach fair housing and making sure that the opportunities are equitably marketed versus having housing for specific groups. And so there are all of these little, I shouldn't say little, they're really big, but these are big factors that will shape ultimately, I think, that next step of looking at feasibility for recognizing what might be more compatible. Because there may be, for example, funds that are available that would better suit themselves for certain housing typologies, just based on the economics of development. What is more costly to develop, what is not. So I think there is that kind of matrix idea makes a lot of sense, and also almost bringing in this other dimension of then what are the resources that would allow a developer to come in and do that, with reasonable ease. So I thank you for bringing that up about the ADA compliant. I'm putting that in the big bucket, the big idea. Like that's a kind of, I see it as a broader, zoomed out. And in addition, that I talked about having a mix of housing typologies, but I'm glad that you also again referenced the mix of ownership versus rental as well. So it's not just about the mix of building types, it's about wanting to serve the needs of those looking to find a place to rent versus own. And then even within that, a couple of people who mentioned the idea of shorter term, the need for shorter term leases in certain situations as well. So all those big ideas. In terms of the specific ideas that, unless I'm missing something, the only, the very, very specific kind of ideas that might kind of warrant further conversation on their own would be that idea of partnering with the housing authority, whether it be a swap or something like that. So I want to kind of put that in its own bucket. The single family with ADUs, again, that doesn't, it's not like it's outside of the realm of bringing in these other things that you care about, like, developing with really kind of green design in mind and things like that. But it's a really kind of cool, specific scenario that we'd want to examine more. And then the kind of split between whether it is a shared use site that focuses on housing and municipal, or more broadly speaking, if the town were to dispose of the property entirely but to perhaps rezone it in such a way that would include some, private businesses and things like that. But either way, so those are really, I think, the only kind of, those are the four really specific site ideas that you might want to flesh out and we'll look at before the second meeting. Are there any that I missed that you would say don't necessarily, it's not a big idea, it's more really, really kind of fine and granular? Other than the housing authority, single family with ADUs, and kind of the different ways of approaching shared uses. Oh, you had also mentioned, Mary, the member who couldn't be here, and I did write this down as well, the idea of potential, kind of communal living spaces, SROs, that sort of thing. That, to me, that is the only time we heard that specific type of.
Palm had.
Yeah, Palm, thank you, yes.
Palm had ideas.
Yeah.
And even that one that is from Myra, the 55 plus.
Yep.
I mean, you might want to keep on the list the LIHTC developments that we've seen in town. The reason being.
What development?
The low-income housing tax credit developments.
Yeah, okay.
In that, they come with funding.
Right, that's, yes.
Like when we said, hey, we have this site on Route 28. You tell us our housing idea. Our first one was Yarmouth Commons. It's a low-income housing tax credit program, right? The second one, we said, hey, we've got this other site, became Yarmouth Gardens, again, LIHTC. So what's that's telling me is that there's, the affordable housing developers have figured out this LIHTC program. You know what I mean? So it's a product that's out there that we can't just cross off.
Oh, right.
Right, because, and we've had some issues with them because we wanted things to be mixed use, and they said that was too complicated. So it's almost like we want a LIHTC light, you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, and so I think that'll be really helpful with bringing in the context of kind of, okay, so how could these be done? What resources are there out for doing this? And so the last thing on our list with the discussion that we wanted to just make sure we circled back on with is, so we need to kind of organize all of these amazing ideas. I really like that idea of kind of looking at it as a matrix approach, but we got a lot of work to do before the second meeting to give you kind of a distilled version of how all of your ideas go together. But on the back of the form, there were kind of other questions that it's our job to do a little more digging on. And I want to ask you if there's anything else. Sites with examples of the idea. So that's, I think, Mary, you had referenced looking at even just some other examples of, even if it's talking more broadly about looking at different examples of density or building types or height.
Village.
Right. And so I think that's one thing that's on our to-do list. Synergy with other teams, that has kind of come up already, but we'll talk through that more with staff. State or local agencies that may be involved. And I would say that really is also going to tie in to the idea where the grant and financial resources available. I know that was on the front page, but that really is going to kind of, it almost is, it's the other side of the coin of like you have your constraints and then you have your resources, and one of the constraints is the availability of resources. So that's going to be a big thing that we also bring, to the table for the conversation next time. But are there any other things that you would want to know and have a better understanding of to frame the ability to kind of narrow down to 3 ideas at the next meeting? Examples?
About the 3 ideas, if we decide a certain population. If you decide there's a certain population and a certain type of housing, and it starts combining ideas into one, I mean, that's really what you want to try to do. That there's a lot of ideas, some of them about populations and some of them about the housing type. Put those 2 together, and that's one idea, for 3. And if you have, 4 housing types, you're pretty close to getting there. All you have to do is put the demographic in it. And not to, muck it up, but there's one more, which is work to live, which is a type of housing where younger professionals would have conference space and also capabilities within the building that they can actually set up their own office, go downstairs, work, shared working space, and then, have an apartment upstairs. Maybe it's not as popular, but it's something that keeps those people in the community.
Thank you.
One thing that I'd be interested in is just kind of like a flag, if there was any potential for the units to go on the subsidized housing inventory and count towards our 10%.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, some of these, just to know if they're gonna go on the inventory or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of our goals, is to hit 10%. I can hear some thoughts, some of the units wouldn't go on the inventory. So but it would be good to know up front if it would go on the inventory or not.
Yep,
Habitats
that's a
would.
good point. Yeah.
Habitats would.
Yep.
Soldier On would. They're a group home. Anything that's just to let you know, a rental building, right, or a rental campus that had at least 25% deed restricted affordable, right? All of those units would go on. So.
So you put that in the what agency is related
Right, right. So, yeah, and I think, like the workforce, which we heard from several participants, if that's over 80%, that's not going to go on the SHI. That doesn't mean it's not meeting a very important need. So that's, I think, where some of these big decisions, will come into play.
But if you did have a rental that had mixed.
Exactly.
Mixed.
Yep, yep.
Which is what I was suggesting.
Right,
And
the
then
interest in
some,
having.
it could accommodate
Right.
some of the workforce who can pay decent rents, but they can't pay astronomical rents out there. And,
Right.
and then if, like Mary says, I always find that incredible. They have 25% are within medium or low income. It has to be at least 80% or less,
Right.
correct?
So if you have 25% of a rental project that is affordable and, meets the definition of the state's definition for affordable housing, if there was 25% of the units are affordable, but the rest are market rate, like no restriction, no age restriction, no income restriction, nothing on them, every single unit in that complex goes on the inventory.
And it could be affordable, it could be just above affordable, and it can be market rate, because the way
Other units can have, this is my other question for you. The other units, let's say you have a building, 25% is affordable, and you want to set aside 25% for workforce, right? What can we legally do, right? Because can you have a municipal sponsored development where there are units that are deed restricted for municipal employees? Does the law allow that? So that's
It's
another.
a very nuanced, yes, that would be a meeting all in and of itself. Yeah,
Checkbox column to say, well, maybe, we might have to pull in town council for it, but,
Because there are things, I mean, when you're talking about specifically reserving housing for municipal employees, some of this is also going to be contingent on what allowances the state, if the town decided to pursue designation as a seasonal community, which you're not automatically in the bucket, but the ability to have local preference for essential workers, local workers, that's in that designation. Otherwise, it's really, it's a fair housing gray area.
Yeah.
so that local preference, right? That's for the initial lease up only. The next vacancy, that goes away.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to think, before the
Something I learned.
second meeting, I think it's like, I'm probably going to have to give some homework it's going to sound like we're trying to just naysay ideas, but it's not it at all. I can just tell you that we're going to want to just frame some of the ideas in just understanding, even from a developer perspective. I'm not a developer, but we've worked with developers, like you were saying, when you had interest in doing mixed use, and you were told by the developers that's, too hard to do.
Developer that
Right.
would do that.
That's the other reality, is
Even
who's
with
going to
like a
do.
huge subsidy from
Right.
the town.
Right.
I mean, here's the land, basically.
Yeah.
Plus construction money. And they still wouldn't bite, so.
Yeah.
And Mary, you had said it's very difficult to get funding for housing for the elderly. Have you said?
So, when the state started all this whole program, which is very admirable, and Chapter 40B came online for use for non-municipal, private developers, they were approving, most of the units that were being approved were for 55 plus.
Right.
So the state and the low-income housing income tax program really started to prioritize family housing. Because all the affordable housing resources were going to senior housing, and that's all that was coming online.
And
There
that's
was no
what the town's been
family housing
approved.
coming
They
online.
didn't have trouble approving those.
Right. So now, when you have a Chapter 40B development, you'll see they always require 10% to be 3 bedrooms. Right? They're looking for the family housing. And for you to get the low-income housing tax credit, you're going to have to provide larger units for families.
And some of the workaround of this is also, potentially subdividing the overall site. If one developer can do, so this will all be meeting two.
Okay.
It's going to be really rich and exciting, but we are at
Bill
almost
has
5.
his hand up.
Use 40R, you can return the cash back to the developer to overcome some of those costs. You can get up to $3 million on a project at 265 units will get you $3 million. I don't know. I didn't look at it, but, I mean, no, not really.
46 units an acre.
Well, no, I mean, on this, yes.
Yeah.
On the project that I was involved in, it was a huge amount of acreage on the top of a hill, and most of it was slope off the site. But my point is, if 40R allows you to help the developer with the cash that the town gets, and it's based on the zoning that you set and not necessarily the number of units you build. So if you have a lot of density in the zoning, but you only build half of that, you're still going to get the cash of the density of zoning. So,
Going back to de-restricted affordable housing in the LIP,
Yes.
Orleans, I don't know if they still have it, but the majority of their affordable housing units are for the elderly, because that's what was more readily able to be approved.
It's hard for us because that's our
That's no-
demographics right now.
And that's no longer the case. I mean, I don't know if that's still the case, but that
We're
was
in
the
a
case.
conundrum.
Huh?
We're in a conundrum.
Yeah.
So I think you covered next step in action items.
Yes, we have a lot of homework to do with staff and
Nice job today.
digest this to make your next meeting, which I think
So
the date is TBD.
Right, so these are the 2 dates that I have the highest number of yeses for. In February 24th at 3 PM. Was that a date that you can make? Okay. Yep. And then in March, it'd be on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th at 2 PM.
March 17th will be at 2 PM for that one?
That's 2 PM.
Okay.
And
then
the Board
20
of Health starts at 5.
Okay.
So February 24th at 3 and March
Okay, yeah, and March
17th at
17th at
2.
2.
St. Patty's Day.
Mary, can I just raise a question about going back to kind of the original charge from Bill and his comment that maybe it's just one project that one proposal that we put together. I heard a lot of consensus about things that, rental housing, save the auditorium, save the gym, save some open space. My idea had, maybe carve up a corner and have it be the village of ADUs. Kathy had thoughts about more dense rental housing. I mean, is there a way that you can, that we could think about having not competing proposals, not have a 1, 2, 3 that we all vote on which one we think is the best, but maybe one that combines all the best ideas that we've heard today. And there seems to be some relative consensus about building type land use, which is again the focus of Bill's, not necessarily the tenant, not necessarily the person who's going to be in the building. That's important, but you would design an apartment as a nice apartment, doesn't matter who lives there.
Right.
You would design a small house with an ADU. It doesn't matter whether it's a vet or a school teacher or a municipal employee. So I'm thinking if we could think about the land use piece,
You're saying,
the buildings, and how they might, if there's a way to not have it be single use, but maybe a combination of things, an imaginative kind of combination of things. I'll use as an example, and maybe other people know it, Wayland Center, when Raytheon sold their site in Wayland, huge site. It became rental housing, it became condos, it became 2 and 3 stories, it became
You're right.
shop over, kind of a Mashpee Commons in some way with parts of Top of Shop housing. I'm not suggesting that is the case, but
I know what you're
that
talking
would
about.
help me, and then the people that we want to, the population we want to serve can overlay on top of that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why we were trying to zoom out in live action here, some of the big ideas that are not necessarily, there's no reason to separate them out because they're not competing with each other. There's no competition. It's just, green design principles, that can be a priority no matter what gets decided. So I think absolutely just, that's part of our next steps is looking at where there is overlap already to just kind of say, hey, these already gel nicely together. And where there may be some kind of specific aspects of a particular idea that we want to discuss more with the group in that second meeting. So absolutely agree.
I would like to see home ownership perhaps be a combination of what you're promoting and what Habitat does. So it isn't just the ADUs.
Would Habitat do Joanne's idea of a
So
home
we are 5 minutes past. But I'll
So
put
we'll
that
pick
down.
this up
We can
again
talk about
on
that.
February 24, and we'll talk about all of those issues. I want to thank Barrett Planning. Both you ladies did a tremendous job. We didn't even spill an ounce of blood, so that is a
A lot
testament
of
to your
consensus. So, yeah.
So we need
great
a
skills. And
motion to adjourn for the trust.
I'll move to adjourn for the trust.
Is that a second, Myra?
Sure.
All those in favor, say Bob, yes. Myra, yes.
Lawton, yes.
Myra, yes.
And then, John, we need a
To
motion.
adjourn for the Housing Committee.
So motioned.
Second.
Roll call.
Josh Trot, aye.
Aye.
Drew.
Lee, aye.
Joanne, I.
Greg, aye.
John,
Aye.
Myra.
Yep.
Sorry, we have,
Good.
thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Looking forward to
Hearing
February.
Everything.